All right. All right. Joining me now on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. He's an award-winning investigative journalist, best-selling author, and he's the man to talk about all these issues, especially with the Maha movement and Big Pharma. He's Gerald Posner, the one and only. Gerald, great to have you with us again, my friend.
Rich, great to be back with you. I always enjoy it.
There's so many things to talk about, but pharma is all the rage right now, and you wrote the book on it, and you talk about all their greed and the lies. And before we get into some of the things around what's going on with our kids, let's just talk about broadly the Maha report that was released and your thoughts on it, and where you see Big Pharma pushing back.
Look, the Maha report is great. It's long overdue. There are things that are taking place under RFK and that entire movement that you read about it and you scratch your head and you say, why wasn't that done a long time ago? Why wasn't that a coloring additive that's been banned in Europe, Canada, Australia, and everywhere else for 15 years not banned here? Why wasn't that preservative that might be linked to high blood pressure and an increased risk for strokes and banned in three-quarters of the world not banned here earlier? So there's some low-hanging fruit that they're taking right off the start. And I don't know how there can't be bipartisan support for that. Democrats should be cheering on the Maha movement. They aren't necessarily, because there's a reflexive reaction that if it's coming from the Trump administration, they have to be against it. But it's absolutely madness because Maha is great. Pharma is caught a little off guard by it. They're getting their ducks lined up. They're thinking about how they're going to lobby, and they aren't going to come out. Look, Pharma is very good. They don't come out with a heavy hammer and say, we're for the stuff that makes you sick, but they're going to push back and say, in their own way, the solution for a lot of making America healthy again is having earlier detection of illnesses like chronic diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And if you can't change your lifestyle, then we have the solution for you. It's an easy pill a day. And that's what they're going to be pushing. Ease, it makes it work. It's proven to happen. A lot of people can't have the discipline to make themselves healthier. Pharma will help you do it.
Let's talk about, for example, like the GLP-1 drugs, all the shots that we hear about. And now there's another one that I guess is GLP-1 and also GLP something or other that I saw. I think Lilly was advertising. These shots now are all the rage. I mean, everybody's taking them. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day, of all places, and it actually asked the question, should everyone be on a GLP-1 shot?
Boy, I loved that article, not because I agree with it, but because I remember articles like that running 15 to 20 years ago about statins.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors were saying, by the way, statins are so fantastic to lower cholesterol, maybe they should be added to the water supply. There's no downside to it. And you know what we find out over time? There are plenty of downsides to drugs. There's no free lunch with this. So now we see the same type of discussion. Oh, and that's definitely pharma push, the drug companies saying, oh, it's not just, by the way, we have here a drug that lowers blood sugar and might help on diabetes. Now it's a weight loss drug, and maybe it has a lot more benefits, like cognitive benefits. You're going to be thinking better. You're going to ward off Alzheimer's. You're going to feel stronger. You're going to have more muscle tone. And I just can't wait for the reports of side effects 5 and 10 years down the road. We're already seeing some of them come in. But let me tell you one thing, Rich, from the perspective of the drug companies, Lilly, from Pfizer, from Novo Nordisk, the Danish company who has Ozempic, these are blockbuster hits. They've come from nowhere. You never know where the next big drug, fueling trend will be. These came out a few years ago. They are now, 3 of them have been retasked, these GLP-1 drugs, as weight loss drugs. They're 3 of the top 10 best-selling drugs in the world. They're taking in tens of billions of dollars in terms of revenue, and there's no sign of them slowing up.
I actually saw the other day, this is crazy, but a local gym in my area was advertising a special where you join the gym and they'll also help you get your GLP-1 drug and help you with the journey at the same time. I thought, man, that's crazy that you even have like fitness clubs embracing these shots now. And I guess they're doing it because they feel like if they don't, they're not going to be able to compete, because people are like, why should I go to a gym and spend all this time and effort when I can just, take a shot?
It's remarkable because, of course, what is it? It's the same old thing. You could lower your cholesterol in most instances. Some people have a genetic predisposition that gives them high cholesterol and it's dangerous no matter what. Other people can lower it if they're on a diet that's relatively healthy and clean. The same thing with diabetes. You can't change it all the time, but you can often make it better and it disappear if you work at it. But that takes work. So guess what? I'm not surprised to see a gym say, we'll give you a little bit of a boost. If you don't want to come in every day and actually hit the weights, we'll help you get the GLP-1 drug. But that's the shortcut. Look, at pharma makes a lot of money based upon selling an easier way to do things to people. And you said a moment ago to get the shot. Think about this. The holy grail right now for these drug companies that are putting out these drugs is to develop, and they're all working on it, a pill. Because they know there are some people who won't take shots. They don't like
Yeah.
the idea of injecting themselves every day. Once it becomes a once a day pill, you're going to see these numbers even skyrocket more.
But didn't we go through this, Gerald Posner, with a drug called fen many, many years ago that was supposedly this weight loss miracle drug, and then it turned out that it had to be recalled?
Yeah, fen is one of the great disaster stories in pharmaceutical history. No question about it. It was a miracle drug. It lost weight. Everybody wants the weight loss drug, and then it turned into all types of heart problems. And remember, Rich, we went through this in the 60s with methamphetamine, which is essentially just speed. The diet clinics opened up. The FDA allowed them at the time all across the country, sort of like opioid clinics opened up decades later. And the diet centers were essentially giving you the equivalent of, black beauties. They were called speed. You didn't eat much because speed was taking away your appetite. The amphetamines were. They existed for about 8 or 9 years until we found out they were causing a massive addiction problem and got rid of them. So, pharma and diet and weight loss is a very successful formula for them. This is the new rage right now.
Gerald Posner's with me. He's the author of the book on pharma, and it's called Pharma. And you should definitely read it, especially with everything that's going on with Maha right now. Well, you should read all his books and go to Posner.com for all of his latest, and subscribe to his Substack as well. He's also on X at Gerald Posner. The the idea of the like food, for example, and you and I have talked about this before. With kids in particular, they are exposed to so much crap that even as a parent, you try your best, right? And we really do. We try our best. Then that you send your kids to a birthday party and they're loading up on sugar, they're loading up on processed foods. It's in the school cafeteria, it's everywhere. I laugh when we have this conversation about SNAP benefits and people are like, oh, we're going to take soda off SNAP. Yeah, but okay, but what about the people that are not on SNAP benefits who send their kids to the cafeteria with money, thinking their kids are going to buy a healthy lunch, but they can buy soda and desserts and cheesesteaks and all these things. And look, man, I'm not anti-cheesesteak. I'm probably going to have one tonight at the game. But my point is, the kids should not be doing this every single day. So when are we going to have a conversation about healthy food for people that are not on SNAP benefits but are going to government-funded places like, say, the school cafeteria?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So look, I don't like the idea of the nanny state. I
No.
was living in New York when Bloomberg was rolling out, his tax on big sodas and everything else. I understand, but we can affect public institutions,
Yes.
schools, especially where kids have to make those choices. Now, my wife and I, we have two godchildren. They're 14 and 16 years old. One of them is actually at a boarding school where the food is remarkably healthy in what they serve. And what do? They end up having Uber Eats bring in Chick-fil-A. So it's hard to be able to. Do you stop the Uber Eats person at the door from delivering the stuff that they want? So we can make it healthier in the cafeteria, but those not on staff who have a little bit of money, discretionary money, more money than they might have from their parents, might still make those unhealthy choices. Very hard to enforce.
There are two things that really just struck me, Gerald. Number one is I hate the nanny state, and I don't think it works. And I appreciated Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, saying we don't want to be the nanny state. That's number one. Because I don't agree with Gavin Newsom banning Skittles. I don't think that works. I think the better way to do it is to public pressure. It's like smoking, right? I mean, you can smoke if you want to, but I don't know a lot of people that really still do because there's a social pressure around it. There's a lot of social influence, and then there's been education around it. The second thing about that, though, is that he also brought up grandma, and I kind of go back to what my Italian grandma used to say all the time, which is moderation and everything in moderation. And the problem with not letting kids be kids and have the occasional ice cream and the occasional candy is that when they go to college, they're going to be snorting Skittles. You know what I mean? It's like the kid who never had a beer goes to college and his first day is like, oh my God, this is the greatest. And you look at trends between Europe, for example, and America with kids and alcohol, and it's night and day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So you're too strict. You try to clamp down in the beginning. You don't give them anything at all. And you're right. When they have a little bit of freedom, when they get off to college, it's going to explode. So we had friends in New York when we lived there. Uh, they were vegans. Their children were raised as vegans. One of those, leave the name out, who's now at the last year of college, I will say is probably the biggest junk food eater of any, young person that I know. So it's hard to
He's
necessarily put that
injecting like
restraint on.
filet mignon into his arms. It's like,
Well,
you want
you
heroin? No,
you
no, no. I
know him.
want a steak in my arm, in my veins.
You know him as well. That's exactly it. That's it.
And it's also fascinating because like you bring up Bloomberg, for example, and his stupid war on salt, which was just dumb, and then his war on trans fats. The war on fat in general, the government got us into so much of this mess, and we have to be very careful now as we go forward to not let the government cause more problems. So I like the idea of undoing the problems that government created. Because, I grew up as a kid in the 80s where I was told fat was the devil and everything had to be low fat. And you remember those days, right? You walk through
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
supermarket aisle, everything was low fat, and carbs were your best friend, and you should eat 6 servings of whole grains a day. And as a consequence of that, everybody got fat.
That's right. And you know what's interesting is, of course, people forget, and they forget when they go through these trends. So you get a period where low fat is the trend and carbs are your friend, and then you go through the Atkins diet where carbs
Yeah.
are the enemy, don't have anything at all, or the South Beach diet and cut the carbs down. What it happens in the end, I have to tell you, with all of the wonderful things that are done, it is in the end calories in, calories out. And if you eat 7,000 calories a day, I don't care if it happens to be all greens, or if it happens to be just a bunch of cheesesteaks, you're still going to end up gaining weight for the most part. It's a fairly simple formula. We also went through a period, Rich, I think, which is an underlying problem, which is we can no longer tell people that they're fat. We can't say,
Right.
by the way, you're really morbidly obese. And the one thing to remember is we have an extraordinarily high cost for Medicare and Medicaid in the country and for healthcare. But about 5% of the sickest people take up about 70%, 65 to 70% of all the costs, without a doubt. And much of that's from obesity.
Yeah.
All of the problems caused by obesity, from diabetes to health problems, heart problems, to treatments in the long run. And it's difficult to be able to tell people that. So I know a doctor, for instance, here in Miami Beach, that recently had told a patient in front of a nurse who came in with a kidney stone and said afterwards, by the way, I want to let you know you're about 80, 90 pounds over your best weight. If you lost some weight, your health might be better. That doctor got reported to the health administration of the hospital for fat shaming.
Unbelievable. Oh my
I kid
God.
you not, because the patient felt as though they were being raked over the coals on something that had nothing to do with their condition. Now, if we create that as the society, no wonder we aren't getting people healthier. So that's one of the things that RFK Jr. and others have to work on, is that you can actually say some things aren't healthy for you. It's not great, as a matter of fact. You may embrace your body, but if you're 200 pounds overweight, you're killing yourself and you're costing everybody else who's paying for the system a lot more at it.
Yeah, it's so true. And not only that, but we also have laws like in California and New Jersey where they say if you're a doctor and you spread misinformation, you could lose your medical license. Now, when the state is determining what is information and what is misinformation and telling physicians that, that's very problematic. And then we have another problem, which is in our medical schools. My God, I mean, I have a friend, I won't name his name, but he's very involved in the healthcare industry. He said medical schools right now are the wokest places on planet Earth.
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, medical schools are a real problem because they forgot meritocracy. So aren't even letting people in based upon meritocracy. They're making it on a pass-fail basis. They're doing away with the standards for medical exams that had taken place. And let me tell you, there was just a lawsuit filed, a class action, as a matter of fact, just recently by Do No Harm, which is founded by ex-doctors. It's a group, an organization that wants to restore meritocracy to medical schools. They sued in a class action UCLA, who has race-based admissions, and we're excluding white and Asian students from getting in order to have a more diverse student body. One of the last places that I want to see DEI or lower standards or academic standards take place is if I'm in an emergency situation, go to a hospital and a doctor's coming out. I want that doctor to be at least, I think, the one who was most qualified to be able to be there as a surgeon that evening as opposed to the one who got through because they decided to do a simpler exam to get everybody through. The same with air traffic controllers. There are certain critical jobs and missions that you would think we would safeguard,
Yeah.
and we're not doing that. And medical schools are a major problem for that. And the medical organizations, the ones like the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Pediatrics Association, they happen to be among the wokest and most progressive of the groups. They're the ones who are embracing the craziest part of gender ideology. They're giving advice to doctors that are often wrong. So when you say that a doctor can be prosecuted or there can be something against them for giving the wrong advice, they can often refer back to what the medical association that they are a member of says. They said, oh, well, the medical association says this is all right to do. The medical associations in the United States are giving cover to some of the worst policies by doctors in the US.
Gerald Posner's with me, investigative journalist and best-selling author, Posner.com, and follow him on X at Gerald Posner. You mentioned do no harm, and actually Dr. Stanley Goldfarb is going to be coming on the show a little bit later. This issue of a hospital, obviously Penn, right here in Philadelphia, they announced they're no longer going to do gender mutilation surgeries on children. However, they are still giving out puberty blockers. You've written extensively about this. I don't understand why we're still at this point in the United States. I mean, you've got England coming out and saying, woke England is coming out and saying, don't use these things on children. When are we going to finally have the FDA, the CDC, now that we're in charge now? I mean, those guys are in charge. Like, when are they going to come out and say you cannot prescribe puberty blockers to children anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it's overdue. Let me tell you, hard to imagine that for such an advanced country, and we pride ourselves on our technology, our medical expertise, and everything else, that we are so far behind. We're at the end of the line in making the corrections on this part of medicine. So you're right. In England, they had a report. They originally were giving out puberty blockers and other things. I wrote in the Wall Street Journal, as you know, 3 years ago, a piece called "The Truth About Puberty Blockers." Guess what? They aren't reversible. There's a litany of side effects. They're permanent in many cases. So there's no free ride on that. In England, they've realized that they've changed the policy, but they've changed it also, Rich, in places like Sweden and Finland, Denmark, real liberal countries that in the past had embraced this have now reversed the clock, but not in the United States. And yes, what Penn is doing, it's a step forward. It's fantastic to think we're no longer going to do the gender mutilation surgeries, but still giving out puberty blockers it means that they aren't all the way back. It would be the equivalent in a very, very rough analogy. If the Nazis had said in World War II, okay, we're not going to execute, we're not going to gas Jews anymore. We're only going to use them for slave labor so they can build things. It would be an improvement over what the worst case scenario is, but it still isn't that great. We've got a ways to go, and we need the federal government leading the way on this, both in terms of CDC and FDA saying, these are dangerous items that are being done both in terms of hormones and surgeries. We need to stop it. The problem in the US, it's easier for the UK to stop because they have National Health Service. We may not want National Health Service. I understand that because it's a disaster in so many ways, but they issue one edict and it stops across the board. Whereas in the United States, the federal government says, no, you can't use it. And then what happens? It's stopped in Medicare and Medicaid. Then it's stopped in hospitals that get federal funding. But if you're a private hospital and you're not using federal dollars, you can continue to use it. So it's almost state by state that you need to have this change. And that's almost impossible in places like California, New York, Illinois, and other centers of sort of progressive ideology.
Since you brought up the Nazis, looking on your X account, you point out that on this day in 1943, Auschwitz got a new doctor. You wrote about that doctor in a very, very famous book called Mengele, along with John Ware. Dr. Joseph Mengele, I mean, his name is synonymous with brutal experimentation on people, but I don't think people really even understand the full extent of just how twisted and sick this guy really was.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But, Rich, there's something I was talking the other day to somebody about this. The Nazis, and Mengele is an example. He's a doctor, 32, 33-year-old doctor who's the top of his medical class, okay? Meritocracy, chosen because he was considered one of the best in this new Nazi theory of racial hygiene and racial purity. And he goes to the largest concentration camp that the Nazis have because to him, that's a pool of experiment victims. And he works on children primarily to try to enhance the what he calls the perfect race. And what the Nazis did in this really twisted, horrible form of science was to try to hide it. They weren't advertising it. As a matter of
Mhm.
fact, Mengele and others after the war, they kept all that under wraps. Mengele kept a diary. He was free for decades. He never wrote about any of that. That's what I think about when I think about the gender mutilation today about children that are taking place. No one's hiding it. They're promoting it. Doctors and institutes that are doing this, they aren't ashamed of it. They aren't saying, oh, by the way, why don't we take a 12-year-old or 13-year-old girl and totally change and try to change their sexual organs so they'll be left with consequences for the rest of their life and medical problems, and they'll always be a patient of pharma. They're actually saying, come to our clinic. We do it. We have the most cases. We can give you a new life. And this is remarkable to me. So that what's changed, I'm not comparing. Look, I've written about the Holocaust. I understand the Holocaust and Nazi crimes are on their own. So I'm not saying it's the same. But I do think it is interesting when you look back to this horrendous medical experimentation that took place 80 years ago, how those who were doing it, the worst of the criminals, the Nazis, tried to keep it a secret because they understood what they were doing was bad. Now we're in a new world where this type of experimentation on children, sexual experimentation to that extent, is not hidden anymore, but actually is something that's promoted and embraced and pushed by progressives. That to me is a bad sign of how upside down the world is.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's criminal what they're doing to these kids. And my God, if Kamala Harris had won that election right now, we'd be going in the opposite direction. Instead of trying to ban this stuff, you'd be getting federal funds for this stuff. I mean, because they promised that. They talked about that during the campaign trail.
Yeah.
Uh, I would be remiss, Gerald Posner, since I have you, if I did not ask about the Kennedy files, obviously the JFK files, because I reread Case Closed recently, one of my favorite books. You know what's fascinating? I said this the other day to, excuse me, our mutual friend Susan Crabtree. I said, we know everything there is to know about Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, literally, you have given us such a great expose of this man, his motivation, who he was. Isn't it amazing how right now it's almost June? A year ago was Butler. We still have no idea about Thomas Crooks, his motivation, nothing. I mean, it's just remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, I am as just flabbergasted by that. I have to tell you. So I have my own Freedom of Information request in to try to get information about Crooks. I want to know more, but I probably am number 250 in terms of journalists who have Freedom of Information request ahead of me. Everybody's trying to get the same information, and it really is up to this administration in terms of the Secret Service and the FBI to let us know what they know about him because it is disgraceful. We talk about transparency all the time. It should not take 60 years to get transparency on a
No.
Kennedy assassination, right? It's taken far too long. And if the government has learned nothing, it is that we need transparency on that attempted assassin because there are all these bits of smoke and questions about him. I'd like to know more. You would, Rich, and I think a lot of people would. So I'm urging the government in terms of Secret Service and FBI and Kash Patel, let's get a report out here, not just a report. We all want to see the report, but let's get the underlying documents. Let's see what you're looking at so we can examine it and draw our own conclusions.
Yeah, and I think that's just the case on everything. I mean, I was really hoping for more transparency on all of this stuff. And you know, I hear Kash Patel, I hear Dan Bongino talk about how it's coming, and they talk about how slow it is, and you know what they have to do. And but I had a laugh yesterday when they said that they were going to release the video of Epstein's prison cell, but they had to enhance it first. And I'm thinking, I mean, they like literally, I could enhance my old my parents. Remember those videos they had back in the day with the reels and everything. Like there are
Yeah.
services that'll do that for you in like 5 days. What's taking so long here?
That's right. Well, the government, it's the government, so it probably means, unfortunately, we have to do it slower and spend more money on it than it would take to do it in the 5-day private service. But the thing is, something very interesting. So Bongino had said recently, so had Kash Patel on Epstein, that they had concluded that he wasn't murdered. Now, last year, early in the year, I spent about 2.5, 3 months chasing what I thought was a very good lead from a source in law enforcement that had been productive for me in the past on information. It always proven to be right. And I thought, oh, this is sort of the Rosetta Stone on the Epstein case. Maybe, in fact, he was murdered. I chased it. I interviewed people. I concluded in the end, because I thought at first it might be a book, that he wasn't murdered. That was without seeing the documents that the FBI seen. So I'm not surprised by their conclusion, but I want to see what they've seen. And
Yeah.
we all want to see it. So you need to get it out there. And it's not enough. Everyone likes Bongino. Okay, I get it. We trust him based upon everything he's done before. The same with Kash Patel. So it's one thing to say you've concluded that, but now we'd like to know what you're basing it on. So again, transparency, guys, you've got to give it to us.
Well said, my friend. Gerald Posner, check out his site, Posner.com. Follow him on X at Gerald Posner. And we always love your stuff, man. We appreciate your time, buddy. And come back anytime and see us, and always keep me posted with all of your breaking stuff that you're writing, okay?
I'll be thinking of you on the game tonight. Hope it goes well.
Me, I just hope we just don't get poured on. That's my only hope.
All right. See you. Thanks, Rich.
See you, pal.